So someone asked me a question. They asked me, should I live with my boyfriend before we get married? And that's a good question. Let's talk about it. What's up? I'm Crew 704, and this is Overflow. Now, just recently, someone asked me a question is that, should I live with my boyfriend before I get married? And what does the Bible say about this? Well, when we get into scripture, it really doesn't say much about living with your boyfriend. And also, it really doesn't say anything about boyfriend and girlfriend.
What?
Because none of that was going on during the Bible times. So during the Bible times, it was more a ceremonial meeting together. They were courting first, then they would get to know each other. It was a learning curve for them, and then they would have a marriage. Now they didn't have anything of a boyfriend staying with the girlfriend or girlfriend staying with the boyfriend to see if this worked out and if it's worth getting married. Because that would be considered under two things it falls under. Number one is convenience, and then there's covenant. Now, a covenant is what we had with God. A covenant is a verbal agreement between, not just verbal, but more of a contract of a man and a woman, or with a man and a woman with God. This is a covenant. It's a promise that will be dedicated to that person or dedicated to God. It's a covenant. Whether God made a covenant with us or we make a covenant with God. Now, convenience is an easy way of saying I'm doing something with not much effort, but I don't have to, it's not very difficult. Example of a convenience store. Back home, whenever I lived at, we had convenience stores because it was easy for us to get to a store when we wanted something. We didn't have to drive 30 miles to go to the supermarket or drive 30 miles to get a haircut. No, the convenience of having a store is that we can go there simply without much effort, get what we need, and we're out. This is what we based our relationships on. When we get into a situation where either a man and a woman want to live together, out of marriage, it's a convenience. It's not a covenant, it's a convenience. And a lot of people say, oh, a covenant is just a piece of paper. But yeah, you have a covenant when you make a car, when you buy a car. You have a covenant when you, let's say you get a phone with a contract. Anything with a contract, even when you buy a home, it's a covenant saying it's an agreement between two people. Whether it's you and the bank, you and another person, it's a covenant. It's an actual written agreement statement. And we fall under the case that when living together, it's a covenant. Now, it's not a covenant. It's out of convenience. Because you live together based on what? Whether it's finances, you want to be independent, or if the person's always coming over or you're going to their house, it's easy for them to have a drawer with their clothes here than for them to go back and forth, You're here already. Now, granted, I'm not exempt from this because I've been in the situation as well. But it took time to read the scriptures to understand that this is wrong. Now, the reason I say this is that I could show a prime example of how I met my wife. Granted, we were friends, yes. But when we knew that it was time for us to make, all right, if we're going to do this, if we're always together and we want to live together, we have to do things in the right way of God. Under the eyes of God, it has to be right. So what? We got married. And granted, you know what? I have no regrets. I have no regrets at all because we fall under the spiritual triangle, which is God, man, and wife, and God. We are underneath God's moral ways, and because of this, He delights. Now we understand that when we're shacking up, it's out of God's eyes, and it's nothing but basically sexual immorality in God's eyes, which is nothing more than fornication. Anything that's outside of marriage is fornication. Now I'll leave a bunch of scriptures at the end, or if you have any comments, that's fine. But understand that shacking up is out of God's will, and it's nothing more than you're living in the sin. And granted, if we want to know who Christ is and we want to get closer to God, if we have this area in our life still blocking us, knowing that it's wrong, it hinders our relationship with God. It truly does. Because basically you're being hypocritical about yourself. Scriptures say that those cannot have two masters. We cannot have one master here and one master there and serve both of them. We can only serve one master. Now the question is, which master are you going to serve? Is it yourself or is it God? Because bottom line, it's the decisions that you need to make are the ones that will please God. Will we live out of sin? Will I continue to fornicate? Will I continue to live in convenience because it's easier? Or am I going to make a covenant with my husband or my wife under God and say, let's do this and let's make this right? If we continue to live in this way, the statistics of divorce are so high because of it. Because why? Because you're already doing. They can leave the relationship not worrying about any backlash, not worrying about, we don't have anything on paper because I didn't make a covenant because I don't think this is going to work. Now, if you believe that you're going to make this work, you believe that there's a future here, then I believe that, it's time for marriage. Some people may be afraid of it because I'm stuck with the person, but you're living with the person already. You're doing the deeds either of a husband and a wife, but the only difference is that you're fornicating under God's eyes. When that area of man and woman coming together is sacred. It's so sacred that shacking up is not even in the Bible. It's from courting to marriage. Now, if you find yourself in the situation where you want to get closer to God, you want to seek the things of God, understand that if you're living under these conditions and you're living outside of God's will, outside of God's way, you still have an opportunity to fix it. We all have a chance to fix it. So fix the condition you're in. Do what's right in the eyes of God. And trust me, He will delight in the things that you do. I'm Crew 704, and I hope this video helped you. And as always,